Hi, I'm Anna, and welcome back to the D1 Audible Cheat Sheets. Hazards, pests, and diseases sit in the background of almost every vineyard on earth. And the hard truth is that they can do two things at once. They can cut yields directly, and they can quietly erode fruit quality even when the crop still looks fine from a distance. They also add cost because prevention, monitoring, and interventions become part of annual vineyard life. The chapter 8 in the textbook is organized in a simple logic. First, the hazards that come from weather and climate events, then, the pests that physically damage vines or fruit or transmit disease, then, the diseases themselves, grouped by fungal, bacterial, and viral. Let's begin with hazards. Drought. Vines need water to survive and to ripen fruit to a commercially viable yield. The guideline figures to hold on to are a minimum of 500 mm per year in cool climates and at least 750 mm in warm regions. When water is lacking, vines protect themselves by closing stomata to reduce water loss. But that response comes with a cost. Stomata closure reduces photosynthesis, and if it persists, shoot growth slows, grape size reduces, ripening slows, yields drop, and in severe prolonged drought, the vine can defoliate and die. In irrigation dependent regions, multi year drought becomes a business level threat because water allocations may be restricted or cut, and whole vineyards can be lost. Management is a planning mindset first. If irrigation is allowed and drought risk is real, it belongs in vineyard design because retrofitting later means disruption and complexity. Then you think about planting material. Drought resistant rootstocks become a priority, especially those with Vitis rupestris and Vitis ballanderi parentage, such as 110R and 140R, because drought tolerance is strongly tied to rooting behavior. And then variety choice matters too. A drought tolerant variety like Garnacha is an example of adapting the system to the climate reality. Excess of water is another hazard. Too much water during the growing season pushes the vine toward vegetative growth, which can compete with ripening and increase shading. High humidity and wet conditions raise fungal disease pressure. If soils are not free draining, water logging can reduce oxygen in the root zone, slow growth, and ultimately kill the vine. Excess water also increases runoff risks and can compact soils, making them hard to work. The key response here is structural and site based. Where excess rainfall is a recurring reality, vineyard planning should aim for slopes or free draining soils and, where necessary, drainage systems installed before planting. Untimely rainfall. The timing of rain can be as damaging as the amount. Rain during pollination and fruit set can cause scolio and milrandage, cutting crop size and potentially lowering quality. Summer rain can slow ripening, and heavy rain close to harvest can dilute must, swell berries, split skins, and increase grey rot risk. Plus, it can make harvest logistics messy, especially on clay soils where machinery access becomes difficult. There isn't a fix for rain, but there are mitigations. Site, slope, soil condition, whether you grass between rows, and the adequacy of drainage all matter. And then there's the reality decision, watching forecasts and deciding whether to pick early for safety, wait and risk loss, or lose part of the crop. Winter freeze. Dormant vines are tough, but when temperatures drop below minus 20 degrees Celsius, winter freeze can seriously damage or kill the vine. If vines are grafted, the graft union is most at risk if it's above ground. Canes and cordons follow. Freeze can reduce yield by killing wood or force vine replacement if damage is severe. Regions with strongly continental climates are especially exposed. The options are practical. Choose warmer sites like hillsides where valley flows are colder. Use moderating influences like large or deep bodies of water. And think about snow as insulation. Variety choice matters because some varieties are more winter hardy, and certain American or Asian species and hybrids can tolerate extreme lows. And then there's physical protection. Hilling up soil around the graft is common, and in the most extreme climates, vines may be buried, which is highly labor intensive and expensive. Multiple trunks can also offer resilience because lost trunks can be replaced. Spring frost. Frost after budburst is one of the most emotionally and financially brutal hazards because it kills the most vulnerable tissue, newly burst buds and young shoots. When primary buds are lost, the vine can push secondary buds, but those are less fruitful and later ripening, so you can lose yield and still struggle to ripen the crop that remains. It helps to separate two types. Advective frosts come from large masses of cold air moving in. Radiative frost happens on still nights when heat is lost, especially with little cloud cover and cold, dense air pools in valley bottoms. Risk reduction starts with sight. Avoid frost pockets and favor slopes that allow cold air drainage. Delay pruning to postpone bud burst. Choose later budding varieties such as Riesling. Train vines higher because the coldest air is closer to the soil surface. And keep soils bare if frost is a recurring risk because bare soils absorb heat by day and release it at night. When frost actually threatens, the methods all have cost. Water sprinklers or aspersion protect by releasing latent heat as water freezes and must stay on until temperatures rise. Importantly, this is the method that can be used for advective frosts. Wind machines work only when there is an inversion layer, pulling warmer air down. The investment is significant. Heaters and candles can work, but they are expensive, labor heavy, inefficient, and polluting. Hail. Hail can shred shoots and leaves, damaging ripening grapes and create entry points for botrytis and other infections. The impact can affect the current season and the next. Protection strategies exist, but none are perfect. Cloud seeding attempts, netting in high sunlight regions, spreading risk across multiple plots, and insurance. Sunburn. Sunlight is essential, but grapes cannot cool themselves the way leaves do. Under prolonged heat, and especially when vines are water stressed, sun exposed grapes can reach damaging temperatures. Sunburn scars skins, can lead to berry death, bitterness, browning, and increases rot risk, often forcing sorting and reducing yields. The prevention is mostly design and canopy choices. Row orientation and aspect matter. For example, in hot northern hemisphere regions, avoiding east to west orientation reduces day long exposure on the south side. Canopy management becomes a protective tool, leaving some fruit zone shade when needed. If a heat wave is forecast, extra irrigation may reduce stress where permitted. There are also protective sprays and shading materials. Fire and smoke taint. Fire risk is rising in hot, dry regions, and climate change is part of that context. Damage can be direct: vines, trellising, irrigation infrastructure, but smoke taint is a separate quality hazard. Smoke compounds can be absorbed by grapes, bind with sugars, and appear later during fermentation when those precursors become aromatic. The strength can even increase during aging as additional precursors break down. Management here starts with diagnosis. Testing must and using microvinifications before harvest to assess severity. Then winemaking choices can reduce extraction. Careful handling, gentle or whole bunch pressing, lower fermentation temperatures, and reduce maceration. Technologies like flash detant and reverse osmosis can help but won't remove taint completely, and blending may be part of the rescue strategy. Now we move into pests. Pests are not just things that eat grapes. Some compete for water or nutrients, some damage leaves and fruit, and some transmit disease. The vineyard response is always an economic calculation. How severe is the threat? What is the likely loss? And what is the cost of intervention? A key historical idea here is that several of the major vineyard threats spread globally through importation. Phylloxera and common mildews were native to North America but became devastating when introduced into regions dominated by Vitis vinifera, which had no natural defense. One of the big solutions in viticulture has been using resistance in American species through rootstocks. Phylloxera. Phylloxera feeds and lays eggs on vine roots, spreading most commonly through human activity. Nursery stock, soil, equipment, irrigation water. It weakens vines by damaging roots, reducing nutrient and water uptake, and opening pathways for bacteria and fungi. Symptoms appear as enlarging patches of vine death over time, and the classic timeline is slow decline with death after several years. The long-term solution is rootstocks derived from American species, such as Vitis ballanderi, riparia, and rupestris, which form protective layers around feeding sites and reduce secondary infections. Early attempts to plant American vines directly created undesirable vine aromas, so grafting Vitis vinifera onto American rootstocks became the standard. Rootstock selection then expanded into a toolkit that can address phylloxera, nematodes, soil pH, drought, salinity, and vigor. It's more expensive than own rooted planting, but it's part of modern vineyard establishment cost in most regions. Nematodes. Nematodes are microscopic worms. Some feed on roots and reduce vigor and yield. Others transmit viruses, including fanleaf virus, via the dagger nematode. Once present, they are managed rather than eliminated. Options are limited: soil sampling and lab analysis, biofumigation using mustard covered cover crops, and resistant rootstocks such as Ramsay and Dogridge, Vitis champigny, alongside heat treated nursery stock. Grape moths. Different moth species attack at multiple generations per season, damaging flowers and grapes and creating entry points for botrytis and bacterial infection. Control can be biological, Bacillus thuringiensis, sexual confusion via pheromones, predators, or chemical insecticides. Spider mites. Spider mites feed on leaf surface cells, reducing photosynthesis, delaying ripening, and lowering yields, especially when vines are water stressed and conditions are dusty. Management can include reducing dust through sprinklers, cover crops or mulches, encouraging predatory mites, and using targeted sprays that preserve beneficial predators. Birds and mammals. Birds can devastate a crop and their damage increases rot risk. Netting is justified in high value sites or where threat is severe. Scarers and noise devices must be rotated. Falcons may be used. Mammals vary by region and are managed mainly through effective fencing, high enough and sunk deep enough for burrows. Next, we move into fungal diseases. Fungal diseases can reduce yield, reduce quality, and raise costs sharply through preventative spraying, canopy work, and sorting. Canopy openness is a recurring theme because humidity and poor airflow create ideal disease conditions. Powdery mildew. Powdery mildew is caused by Irisifae necator and thrives in shaded conditions with an optimum temperature around 25 degrees Celsius. Unlike downy mildew, it does not require high humidity, so it can spread even in relatively dry regions if canopies are dense. It overwinters in buds and on canes, then attacks green parts early, showing dull gray patches that can darken. It can damage shoots, inflorescence, grapes, and lead to splitting at veraison. Management is prevention led. Open canopy, early seasonal control, sulfur sprays starting a couple of weeks after bud burst through veraison, and systemic fungicides where permitted, with resistance management in mind. Downy mildew. Downy mildew is caused by Peranospora, a water mold that lives within vine tissue. It requires rainfall and warmth, with high risk in warm springs and stony warm summers, around 20 degrees Celsius. Symptoms include yellow oil spots and downy growth on leaf undersides. Its main damage is defoliation, which undermines ripening. Traditional control relies on copper sprays like Bordeaux mixture, but protection lasts only until around 20 mm of rain, which drives repeated applications in wet climates. Copper is the main organic option, but there are environmental concerns about accumulation and policy pressure to reduce use of copper. Other fungicides are available, and again, canopy openness and drainage reduce risk. Grey rot. Botrytis cinerea causes bunch rot, reducing yields and harming wine quality. Entry points matter. Tight bunches, rubbing, punctures from birds or insects. It can infect at flowering and remain dormant until after veraison. Tight bunched and or thin-skinned varieties such as Semillon, Sauvignon Blanc, and Pinot Noir are at higher risk. Spores are common in vineyards. The trigger is wet and humid conditions. Management focuses on reducing entry points and susceptibility. Variety choice where possible, pest control, open canopy, and leaf removal around bunches. Sulfur and copper are ineffective. Other fungicides can be used at key timings, including near end of flowering, end of grape formation, bunch closure, and veraison, with resistance risk. Biological antagonists such as Bacillus subtilis are part of modern control thinking. Trunk diseases and other fungal issues also matter operationally. Eutypa dieback infects through pruning wounds in rain and moderate temperatures, slowly reducing yields and killing vines over years. Control is difficult, but late pruning and wound protection help. And infected wood must be removed beyond visible symptoms and burnt. Phomopsis is associated with cool, wet springs and requires timely fungicide programs and removal of infected wood. ESCA is complex, enters via pruning wounds, has no chemical control, and pushes growers toward prevention. Clean stock, improved pruning practices, sanitation, and research into biological agents. And now we move into bacterial diseases, starting with Pierce's disease. Pierce's disease is caused by bacteria that clog the vine sap channels, leading to fruit shrivel, leaf drop, and vine death within a few years. It's spread by sharpshooter insects, and the glassy winged sharpshooter increases spread rate. Symptoms are not always clear, so laboratory testing is needed. There's no direct chemical control of the bacteria itself. Management is about controlling the vector. Removing host habitats, insecticides were used, biological control such as wasps that attack sharpshooter eggs, strict quarantine, and longer term breeding for resistance. Grapevine yellows. This is a group of serious diseases spread by vectors like leafhoppers and by infected nursery stock. Symptoms include delayed bud burst, drooping shoots that fail to lignify, and canopy yellowing or reddening depending on grape color. Economic damage comes through sharply reduced yields and fruit with low sugar and high acidity. There's no cure, so it becomes vector control and hygiene. Reduce leafhopper populations. Remove host plants, including cover crops, when they act as reservoirs. And nursery hot water treatments to kill disease in propagation material. Viruses. Fan leaf virus. Fan leaf degeneration stunts early growth, distorts canes, and produces pale, malformed fan like leaves, with impacts ranging from mild to severe crop loss in susceptible varieties like Cabernet Sauvignon. It spread historically through infected grafting material and is transmitted slowly by the dagger nematode. There's no cure. Management is prevention and replacement. Test soils for dagger nematodes before replanting and use virus tested clean material. Leaf roll virus. Leaf roll is widespread and spread by grafting and by mealybugs in several regions. It doesn't usually kill vines but can halve yields, delay ripening, increase acidity, reduce color and sugar, and reduce carbohydrate storage, excuse me, which weakens the wine. Symptoms often appear in autumn as downward rolling leaves and color change. Again, no cure. Management is removal and replacement with clean stock, screening by nurseries, and vector management. Open canopies reduce humid conditions, mealybugs favor. Targeted approaches are needed because mealybugs are hard to spray due to waxy coatings, and biological predators are encouraged. And that's chapter 8, the Vineyard Reality Check chapter. It's a reminder that vineyard performance is not only about good choices in the calm years, but also about how the system absorbs shocks, water stress, frost, hail, pests, and disease pressure without losing fruit quality and economic viability. I do hope this helps, and I'll see you at the next episode.